Hello. Welcome back to the
Hi.
Shifting Lead.
For the third time tonight.
See Chad's screen now. There we go. Um, we're having some technical difficulties, but no fault of Chad and or me because we're having like a windstorm over here in New Jersey that's like 55-mile-an-hour gusts. So apologies. So if you're listening to us, it's like nothing ever happened. If you're watching us, sorry. we can't control what's going on outside. It sounds like there's like 8 tornadoes right now. So we were talking about press cars and getting them, and I had posed a question to Jack. If you're just joining back and watching, was since you're getting like so many press cars and you have 2 cars and you were thinking about like selling your other one, do you find yourself wanting like for a second car potentially like do you feel like you really need one? And you were talking about the Suburban being your like main piece of transportation essentially.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about, where we found ourselves with all these press cars is it makes you think about what do you want versus what do you need. Obviously, like a lot of people when we had young kids, we got the Suburban because we were like, well, we'll just get all the space and then we'll never need, more space because we'll just have all the space. And it's done well. I mean, we put 175,000 miles on that thing and it's been a tank. And, I appreciate its service as a family vehicle. But now we're definitely in the position because we get press cars for the channel, for the social media stuff, where we're not only thinking about just reducing it to a single car for my wife, which would be hers, but I mean, we share the press cars. So really it just is a single car for the family. As my oldest goes off to college and takes, her RAV4. And then just having that and being like, well, we could probably also downsize too, because as kids get older, the need to carry a bunch of stuff on vacation and it's just not there like it used to be. So,
Right.
then it becomes then you start getting that want need, kind of range where it's like, well, we've always had a big trucky SUV. And my wife really enjoys large trucky SUVs, but how far can we go down the scale where she is like, I still enjoy this. It feels kind of like a truck. But it's definitely more modestly sized. We don't need a vehicle that large, which is why, the new Land Cruiser is so appealing to us and the new Forerunner, fingers crossed,
I
you
Yeah.
know.
was I was
Um,
just gonna say Forerunner
yeah.
GX sounds right up your alley.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I have a Auto Trader saved nationwide search for the previous gen GX with certain levels of mileage on it. And I've just been watching those values kind of coming down, 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 and
Mhm.
I'm like, yes, keep falling, keep falling.
Yeah, I also have that. I have it's a problem at this point. I have car gurus on my phone. I'm not going to count how many tabs I have open for how many cars, but I have 48 tabs and over 40 of them are cars. So, but I have a Forerunner one and a GX one of the previous gen right next to each other to be like, I wonder how they're going. And even Forerunners are dropping a little bit. They're not.
Yeah.
It's not a lot, but you know,
Yeah.
the ones that used to be 48,000, I've seen them come down to like 46.5 or 46, and I'm like, okay, so they're dropping a little bit, based on all the used car stuff that's been going on. And I've seen like 2015, 2016s on even on CarMax going for like 28. And I'm like, that's pretty good. And granted, they're higher mileage, they're like 90, 100,000, but you can get a 100,000 mile Toyota Forerunner on CarMax with another 50,000 miles of warranty on it, like because they offer that now, which is really cool. So, but I think yeah, that sort of drop down is right in your alley of like Forerunner GX, because if you're gonna downsize to something really freaking cool, and those two are right in that wheelhouse.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I always say that the Forerunner is my number one irrational love affair. Like every Forerunner I've tested in the past couple of years, I absolutely adore it. Even though in my mind I'm going, it's still a 5 speed, the engine's underpowered, it rides like a truck, it's missing a bunch of options that, a modern car should have, and then my eyes go, shut up, I don't care. Look at this thing. I love it so much. It's like it's the number one
Yeah.
irrational love
Yes.
right now in my car world is the Forerunner.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm
same.
right there with
They're
you.
awesome.
I've been tracking kind of like the used car values for the GXs and the Forerunners, and yeah, it's like the GX is a more of a bargain.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to find cheaper GXs with the, like same years, well maybe not same years, but like same mileage. You'll be able to find, I think, more GXs than Forerunners. I will just say that uh, since we're both kind of like doing the same thing, where we are like really like looking into these, like I think the rust is one of the issues that you'll run into with Forerunners and GXs. So it's there could be a reason why some of these are like aggressively valued, because maybe there's something going on with them underneath that it's hard to show in pictures.
That's why I try to keep my searches limited to the southern states. I always check that Carfax and make sure. I'm like, oh, if it's going north
Yeah.
of the Mason-Dixon line, no, like
Yeah, yeah.
none of that salt you guys have up there, and all that kind of stuff that you get on the roads. But yeah, I've definitely been looking at those, and I've noticed that the GX, especially if you look at the 2022 and 2023 model years when they redesigned the infotainment system, so it had the last infotainment before the current infotainment. So like the current one went to the big 14-inch screen. They 2022 and 2023 had the last infotainment before that. So it still had the trackpad, but they got rid of that god awful mouse, thing that they used to have. And the values of those, you can find those getting into the low 40s with like not that many miles on them. And for what you get, I mean, a loaded GX with, a couple miles and leftover warranty or whatever, like that starts to look like a really compelling value proposition.
The trade-off is in the operating costs of the GX, just because it does take premium fuel, and yeah, you do get more power out of it, but yeah, it's just the operating costs is higher compared to a Forerunner. But
V8, which is the best.
That's true. V8.
Like, and the crazy thing about that V8 is just how long it stuck around.
Oh yeah.
We were talking about the SC and how that had a 1UZ in it. These GXs have been pounding around with the 2UZ for, 3/4 of my life, 30 years. It's insane. But those engines, so the head design in them was really clever, as the fact that they, as someone who owns a Mustang with a Coyote in it, dual overhead, the heads on those things are enormous. Because of that. Well, in the UZ family of engines, they use a scissor gear in the middle of the cams, so they can bring the cams closer together. So when you look at the front of the engine, you only see the one cam gear, because the one cam is actually driving the other cam in the scissor gear, which is in the middle of the head. So they're very narrow. The downside to that is that I think it's the angle, the acuteness of the angle of the intake runner isn't ideal. So one of the first thing anybody does with these engines is they get a good port and polish to help with that. And that helps with when I say efficiency of the engine, I mean the ability to produce power. But also, if you're not driving like an idiot, it's just a more efficient way of getting air into the engine. And it does actually improve mileage slightly, even though it's not the reason you ever do anything like that. But I said this last week. A buddy of mine, the 2UZ is big with drag racers because cast iron V8 block that loves boost. Like, they're just, again, it's from that era when Toyota's like, okay, we're only going to give it 300 horsepower, but what if it had 900? Just in case, we're going to engineer it for that.
Someday, in a quarter of a century, someone will try to make 900 horsepower out of this engine. Therefore, we should engineer it to take that.
Well, it's funny, like the Supra, the Mark IV Supra, like really didn't take off as like the ultimate tuner dream until like almost a decade later. Because I know that when did the original Fast and Furious come out? I think it was 2001.
2001, 2002, I think, somewhere around there.
Right at the tail end of the Supra's run, or the Mark IV's run.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And like it was known in smaller communities as like a tuning like darling, right? Just like most of the Japanese cars from that era, an NSX, any Honda, specifically Civics, EK hatches, like things like that. Like there were GTR R34s, R33s, R32s, like they were all known in like real enthusiast communities to be like, crazy tuner cars. But like the Supra was known through Gran Turismo also, but it wasn't like until it grew a wider audience until the Fast and the Furious really came out and people started to really understand overall how batshit insane engineered the 2JZ was and how much you could chuck at it. I mean, and look, it's not like you can throw 2,000 horsepower at a stock 2JZ that like doesn't exist and it never will. But it's not like I mean there are 2JZs out there with pistons and that's it, pushing well over 1,000.
You can with headwork get 1,000 out of the stock rotating. The
Right.
question is how long, but we're not talking about like 1,000 horsepower and then kablamo. Like you're getting a few passes.
Yeah,
like, you're getting.
It's not long for this world, but that was it's the same with the Toyota V8s. Like a lot of people don't understand how over engineered they are, and it didn't really have that like seminal moment like the Fast and the Furious franchise did for the 2JZ and the Supras. So, but the Toyota V8s, just like, man, the stuff that they're doing in the tuner community with those things is just bananas, and it's so cool, and they sound incredible when they are done correctly. They are one of the coolest sets of engines ever made, literally ever.
Well, I think in the Fast and the Furious, if I remember correctly, when he's talking about the build, I think he says 2JZ. And I know for like a lot of people that was like the first time they'd ever heard it. You know what I mean? Like that, like, cause I'm a little older than you guys. And I remember in the 90s seeing the Supra when it came out and being like, that's a cool car. Like it's a cool car. It didn't sell super well. So seeing one was still kind of an occasion, right? Like you saw it and you were like, wow, hey, look, a Supra, that's cool. But then when the Fast and the Furious came out, I was 22. And when I saw what they like did, like I remember, and I was a car guy, like I love cars, but I remember being like, you could do that to a Supra? What? Like it was like, like it hadn't even occurred to me that like you could do these things to like the Supra. Like you heard like, oh, people put a big turbo on it or something like that. Like I had heard about stuff like that in high school. But then when I saw that and you saw them just like build one out and stuff, and of course the famous Supra Ferrari race and all that. And I just remember being like, wow, whatever I thought of the Supra, I underestimated the Supra. And it was like a whole light bulb went off in the greater automotive community, because if you weren't a JDM guy, you really didn't know. You really had no idea. And I was over there being like Corvette, Corvette. And then I saw that and I was like, the Supras can do that, like it was kind of a cool revelation to everybody.
As corny as that movie was, it was really well researched in like a lot of the terms and the cars that were chosen.
For the most part.
The guy,
for the most
part.
But like,
there was a few lines that you're like, wait, what? What did he just say?
Yeah, well, it's like
that brings me to.
I was going to say that the guy that they had to as they brought on as a consult and to choose the cars. I think this guy's name is Craig Lieberman. He was actually featured.
I was just going to mention
in some of this. He was the guy that was in during Race Wars. He was the guy that was starting everyone. And but he has
he's got a great YouTube channel. By the way.
Exactly. I was just going to say he's got
Craig Lieberman on YouTube. It's all about the Fast and Furious.
I think the maximum
he goes like in depth.
Was his actual car that that like the bearded asshole drove.
Oh really? That's cool.
I forget what the exact lore is, but effectively they had a car for this guy. Like the Fast and Furious cars, there's a bunch of stuff that's fascinating about it. Like for example, well, I guess we're supposed to believe it's a GST or whatever, the Eclipse in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That actually had a naturally aspirated version of the engine that was in the SRT4. and they just attach NOS to it. Like the actual car itself, right? And we're supposed to believe it's like this turbo nice NOS car, but it only had that engine. It didn't even have the Mitsubishi engine. I understand this was in the era of DSM and stuff, but you had that. But yeah, like the Maxima, it was supposed to be something completely different. I don't know if it was like an importing thing, or it might have even been the person whose car it was got in an accident, and they're like, shoot, we need a car. And this guy's like, have my Maxima. But like, hey, you guys,
But yeah,
you guys both mentioned that scene where it's like, oh my gosh, 2JZ and blah blah blah. It's like, one, give them credit because they're actually naming the engine, and like nobody really did that. It's like, show me in movies up to that, like where they were like, wow, that's an LS or a 454, like, you know, like they weren't going into the minutia of the naming of the engine, right? But that to this day is the like, I understand it's a movie, and like you have to do with, like, you're not going to have a chart out perfectly good Super, right? You're going to find the cheapest one you can. But they, number one, you see the Super shell, and if you're supposed to be this import shop who knows what a 2JZ is, you should know that the Super came with literally nothing else. Number one. And number two, if you look at it, it's obvious just by looking down on it and seeing the intake manifold that it's an NA. Now, don't get me wrong. The only major difference is that it didn't have the oil squirters, and the head design is a little different. But as Tavares showed with his Supra, you can take a GE block and make big power. There are some people who actually believe it's the stronger of the two blocks. Yeah. But it always annoyed me that it's like, ooh, 2J, but it's the NA one with the weaker pistons and like, as a car guy, it hit that, you know.
Hanson, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were going to make a point about Fast and the Furious before, and you were talking about, you were going right into Craig Lieberman. What were you going to say there?
Oh, I was just going to say that he's got a YouTube channel, and he goes into, you know, the interesting details about the cars that were selected, and, you know, the cars that didn't get selected. But yeah, it's like, if you check out his YouTube channel, he really goes in depth into a lot of the decision making that went into it. But yeah, I think it was successful. Well, because, you know, it captured such a unique culture that not a lot of people knew about. Only, you know, in like magazines and stuff like that. But you know, there's a lot of nerdery behind it, you know, and he's definitely one of the talents that was that infused a lot of that.
And he's the one who taught the producers that physics don't exist if you try hard enough.
Yeah.
Which is why we're on Fast and Furious 9
I don't think it was
or
him.
10 or whatever.
I'm fairly certain that was The Rock or Jason Statham.
I mean, yeah. I'm just surprised that they literally haven't jumped a shark. Like, just that meta moment in a movie where they quite literally jump a shark. Like, come on. Like,
there's like a Free Willy moment going on, and then a car just like sails over.
You don't need to jump the shark when you have family.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, you got family.
But, you know, it's funny because it was also like, you know, I'm a big movie nerd, and like that, it was just kind of the perfect time to be rebooting the sort of 90s action film. And so the fact that it was infused with car culture and you had these up and coming stars, I think that it, you know, the car thing was a big deal, and it sort of gave that culture a moment and a voice. But like, I remember like seeing it, and people would be like, oh, you know, did you see Fast and Furious? And I said, yeah, it's just Point Break, but with cars. And they were like, that sounds awesome. And I'm like, it is awesome. Like that's what it is. It's literally, they just remade Point Break, even right down to the ending, and just swapped surfing for cars. And and it was perfect because it was almost, you know, 8 years after Point Break, you know. Actually, I think it was 10. I think it was about a decade. I think Point Break was 91.
just with way less red.
My favorite thing is when they show what they were
50%
stealing.
less Anthony Kiedis.
Less Anthony Kiedis, more Paul Walker / Vin Diesel.
But I mean, like, it was just a timing thing. You know, you had the cars, PlayStation, you know, Gran Turismo had become huge and stuff, and it just all kind of like coalesced into that. And I think it's really cool that we still see the effects of that, you know. And I wish that maybe, you know, some of these companies, they they hint at it, they tease at it. Like I remember, Hanson, remember when we were in New York for the 45th anniversary Supra thing, and they like in one of the press things it said something about like and its starring role in films, and it was like they wouldn't say Fast and Furious, and I was like, I don't know, if it was a copyright thing or they were just afraid to be too juvenile, but like they were like hinting at it, and I was like,
100% of copyright.
but I'm like, but it's totally
Yeah, we
true.
don't-
Here we are 20 years later, and one of the biggest corporations in the world is painting their 45th anniversary super bright orange with side graphics. And I was like, that's crazy. That's crazy that it had that kind of impact.
Sort of speaks volumes to like how impactful
Oh,
that
totally.
was for like car
I mean, it
culture
blew up the
just
import
in general.
scene.
Because it was always like, right, especially the import scene, and there had been like, I mean, Fast and Furious when it came out, it was a good movie. It was a, big-ish, but then like the whole franchise has just blown up into this like craziness. But people that know the franchise now will probably go back and watch the originals
Yeah.
or the first couple, and they learn more about the car community through that way, which is cool. So like, as much as like Vanishing Point and movies like that brought car culture to more mainstream stuff in like the 70s, 80s, the Fast and the Furious brought the new wave of like automotive enthusiasts. And we've talked about it on stream before. Like Fast and Furious really was like the nexus point for the next generation of car enthusiasts to kind of like be born, if you will.
Well, because it celebrated enthusiasts. Like I remember being
Right.
a kid who liked cars and seeing a movie and being like, those are cool cars, or that's a cool car chase, or that's a cool like, like good guy car, hero car, bad guy car. But like the Fast and Furious was like, this is car culture. Like that was like the difference,
Yeah.
to me, is that like, we could go on a tangent about like what are some of the best car movies of all time, but I think a lot of them would be car movies, whereas Fast and Furious was like car culture movie, and that was something that hadn't really been done. I mean, you look at like Bullet, and you look at in the 80s with the car stuff like Knight Rider and stuff like that, and they were all shows or movies that had a cool iconic car. Or you look at a movie like Ronin that had
Italian
one
Job.
of the best car chases of all time, but those were like their own thing. But Fast and Furious, it was like, what's the actual culture around cars? And that was brand new, it's fresh.
I think what's cool about Fast and Furious is it's sort of like how we kind of identify with our friends or our car friends. It's like sometimes you know people just by their cars and not their names. It's like, oh yeah, that's the Forerunner guy, or that's the
You're still the Evo guy to me, Hanson.
Thank you.
I was just about to say that. You have to be the Evo guy.
I'm the Evo guy, yeah. But it's like, what's cool about Fast and Furious is like the cars are the stars, and like you see so many of the stars, and like each car was associated with the hero, and like it's like you always see them together, and I feel like no other car movies did that successfully, where it was like the point was to see the car. All the older ones, like I guess in a way, Smokey and the Bandit, gosh, I forgot the car now, but
Trans Am.
that was kind of like the only the Trans Am, like that was the only thing that you saw.
Trans Am or Firebird?
But and then the sheriff, of course, but
Trans Am.
Buford T. Justice.
But it Buford.
Oh my god! But here's the thing, like to kind of piggyback off of all you guys' points, like Smokey and the Bandit was a great movie, but it was Bandit just so happened to drive a cool car, and the car became a star because the car was cool. But they don't really go into too much about said car. It was just it had a V8, it looked cool, it sounded great, it had wild graphics on it, but that was about it. Well, Fast and the Furious, like to Hanson's point, like you saw the character and you knew Vin Diesel's character in the original one. He was the RX-7. You knew that aforementioned guy, he was in the Maxima. The guy had the Skyline, so on down the road. And the cars were almost extensions of their personalities. You know, like Jesse was a little weird, and he had, you know, his quirks and ADD and whatever they said in it or whatever. But like, and he had the European import, right? Like in a sea of where everything was JDM.
Which had no front brakes, by the way.
Of course it didn't.
If you looked at a shot where he's in Race Wars, you just see like the rotor and no caliper.
Well, that's why he ran. He wasn't afraid of the snowflake, but like
he just couldn't stop.
It looks so much cooler when you can't brake.
Hey, you don't win drag races by braking.
Yeah.
But like, and that's how it is in real life, right? Like you see your car is almost like an extension of maybe not your personality, but of like what you wish you might be able to be or something like that. Or, you know, like Hansen has a very unique set of what he looks for and what he owns in a car and like the cars you've had and everything like that.
I have a very unique set of skills.
Yes.
And then, you know, Greg, even to a much larger extent with, you know, his love affair with Volvo and like making Volvos cool and fast and fun and all this other sort of stuff. You know, out of all of us, I've probably had the widest range of cars since we've known each other as far as different types of vehicles, from like a Focus hatchback, IS300, M3, Volvo hatchback, Mustang, like all over the place. But like, it's just interesting to see a movie represent that. Like, cars are more than just like, this is cool. It's this is cool because, right? Like, and
right.
So many quote unquote car movies don't really dive too much into that, which I think, again, that's what made Fast and Furious and Tokyo Drift, in my mind, the two best of the franchise, because they were car culture. The others were kind of an action or a heist movie or a whatever the hell the last one was. But like those two spoke to car people. Now, again, car enthusiasts were a very small portion of the automotive community, and we're even a much percentage-wise a much larger or smaller percentage of the overall movie-going public. So there's only so much car stuff they're gonna stomach. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool, but what about if we added a jet car and a submarine? And like that sort of stuff, like in the direction, like I still.
That's where they lose. That's where they lose me.
Yeah.
I agree.
But there's still a relatability. Like that was the thing about cars in the original, is like even the people that, you know, you dragged your boyfriend or girlfriend to the movie that they weren't into cars, people can relate to them more. And you kind of might joke about it being Point Break with cars. Well, but Point Break is cool and surfing is cool, but a lot fewer people can relate to surfing than they can relate to like cool cars. Like cool cars are all over the country, in every city, like in even, you know, your friends, your parents, your, you know, spouses or whatever are like, oh, I like that car, or I like that car. There's a cool car. And so there's just this like accessibility and relatability thing. There's like, that makes it just such an easy movie to like enjoy. And you take the same character tropes, you know, and then you just put them into something like car culture, and it just kind of worked. Whereas like in Point Break, putting it into surf culture felt so like California, man, like, you know, and it was like a different thing. But I think the car culture thing is just something even non-enthusiasts can be like, oh, I know someone like that, you know, who's into cars.
I mean, that's a great point. You know, surfing is sort of niche, but everybody, or a significantly larger portion of the population, owns a car, right? And like the cars in Fast and the Furious, it wasn't like, you know, they laughed at the Ferrari, right? Like, which is, none of us are going to own the Ferrari, but they're sitting here. It's like, okay, so it's a Supra, and it was very expensive for a Toyota back in the day, but it was still a Toyota. You know, the cars they were using to pull off the truck heists were Civics, and you know, it was it
was like a superhero version of those,
right? But you could sit here and then, and I'm not gonna dunk on Civics or what have you, but like everybody. I can own a Civic, and that's really cool. But suspension, underglow, exhaust, like that's cool. Like that modding culture of I don't need, you know, a $50,000 car to get this cool. I only need a little bit of cool. or a normal car, and I can get that same amount of cool.
And it just increased the relatability too, because like the Civics that they were driving in that, literally everyone in my high school had one of those Civics. Like that was one of the most common teenager cars where I grew up. And so like you could be sitting in the movie with your girlfriend and she'd be like, "Oh, that's like my car." You know what I mean? Because like they took a car that anybody could have and then they turned it into this kind of blacked out villain car that was like robbing trucks and stuff. And so many people could just instantly identify that car and go like, "Oh yeah, that's just a Civic." Like, "Oh, crazy, it's like going under the truck. That's crazy," you know. Which I don't know. On a side note, if you guys have seen the meme of like, it shows them when they open up the back of the truck,
Yeah,
and it's like a bunch of DVD players or whatever.
It's like these little
like,
TV, like not flat screens, tube-based
Yeah,
TVs
little-
with the
little
VC
TVs.
integrated VCR and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And they're like, Fast and the Furious pulls off a heist of $600,000.
Yeah, it's like, and meanwhile, we now have like more computing power in our pocket than those in the entirety
Right.
of those.
But they're financing their entire criminal operation on a heist of like 200 grand.
Yeah. It's but no, it was just that. That's the best way. Like that movie was just like it hit so many. Sure, like as car enthusiasts or looking back on it with from a few years later with a more quote unquote critical eye, or like, hey, I know more than I did then. Let me just, well, that's wrong, and that's, but like they hit so many of the things that car enthusiasts will immediately like, hey, they're speaking to me and stuff like that. No other movie really does this, and things like, yeah, they, even in that movie they jump things like, I forget, there's another one out there where it's like, what is it, Johnny Tran or whatever, his
Mhm.
his S2000 and the amount of work it had, and like someone like who actually like was around in that scene during then, they're like, yeah, that's off by a magnitude of like 400%, but like,
Yeah.
you know, it's just, it was cool.
Yeah.
And like, and a lot of the cars, you know, some of the cars were sort of faked, like the Jetta, even the Supra was just a base Supra with a livery and I think an exhaust, but like it
I
wasn't.
think the best example will always forever be Danger to Manifold, and then the passenger footwell just falls
Yeah.
apart. And you're like, what the hell does that even mean? Like,
Well,
Well, you see a bunch of washers being jetted out
Exactly.
from somewhere.
Well,
Like this
I don't know if
car
you guys-
made of washers.
you guys clearly weren't paying attention. It was the seat bracket manifold that was in danger.
yeah. Well, I love that not only does the computer say Danger to Manifold, but then those like screws and what they start pinging out of the floorboard. They're like ping, 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 and you're like, what is exploding right now? Is it the fuse panel is gonna like blow up the car?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that one always made me laugh. And then when he finishes the race and Vin Diesel's like, "You don't even know your car. You're not double
Oh my
clutching
gosh,
like you should."
Yeah.
And I was like, double clutching? What the hell is he talking about?
you haven't had to double, you know, like you haven't had, or there hasn't been a need to double clutch since synchros were invented.
Right.
Like if you to understand double clutching, go back and watch the famous car chase in Bullet, and you'll notice the Mustang, even like, it sounds like he's rev matching when he's accelerating. That's double clutching.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, it was funny. So after seeing that movie, I was in college at the time, and I was still playing baseball, and we had a bunch of guys on the team who like were like, this is awesome. Like there was a guy in there with a GS, what was it, a GSR Integra. There was another guy with the, you know, a Fox body Mustang and this, that, and it just so happened at my college, we had enough space in a parking lot for 8th mile drags. So the one guy comes in, I don't even remember what car he had, and at the time I had a mildly worked on Focus ZX3. Not setting the world on fire, but we had like all these relatively slow cars that we could have fun with. And I beat him in the drag race, and he goes, "I don't understand, man. I was double clutching." I was like, "It's probably because you don't need to double clutch. You have synchros, chief." Like, it's like because
Granny
shifting.
shifting.
You mean shifting like you're supposed to? I mean,
You mean normal?
Like, but that was the funniest thing, and like they're quoting this like they're living it, and it's like my dad was a lot of, if not all of my car enthusiasm comes from my father. Like, he had a 59 Corvette that they took the 283 out of, took a 327 from an Impala, had a board stroke, balanced, blueprinted. It was like 380 or 390 cubic inch, I forget exactly. You know, big brakes, big wheels, big tires, back in like this, like I think it was the 60s, early 70s, you know, right before like the gas crisis and stuff like that. And like the modding, and he's like, yeah, I had to double clutch because our transmission didn't have synchros, and also if I wasn't paying attention in a turn, I would lose skin on my knuckles because no power steering, and the steering wheels were like a bus wheel. Yeah. So like when it snapped back, and it wasn't like it was padded like they are now, it was literally machined. I think it was steel, and it would just take the skin right off. But he would tell me, he would tell me stories about how it was like. He never actually told me the exact rules of the game because he knew I would try it. But they used to play like, it was kind of like automotive hide and seek / tag. So like you'd have the guys go out, and then they'd go out like 30 seconds before, and then you had to catch up to them, and then like they would try to get away from you so they could hide. And then if you found them or like, I don't know, but he would always end the story with, yeah, my buddy and his GTO, there was this road lined by trees, and the trees had enough space to where like a car would go through them. Well, he didn't do it on purpose, but he did it, and then he took a mirror off. But that's how close he got to it. He was trying to put like the fear of God on me, like, don't do this shit. Like but like he would tell me these stories, and, like, but it was just like, it was cool when Fast and the Furious came out because all the cars I was surrounded by were getting modified. Like my dad was talking about modifying his Corvette. Like he modified the Mustang. Like he built a Volkswagen Beetle by simply just going to junkyards and getting all the parts he needed for it. And then getting bigger jugs for the engine so it made more power, even though it was supposed to be his economical fuel crisis car and stuff like that. Like all that. It was cool to see. I was like, hey, I can modify my Focus. I didn't know that. Let's do it. Like it's just
yeah. And there's the tuner culture in a nutshell. It's like, I have this slow car, let's make it faster. And ooh, I can do this to it. Ooh, I can do that to it. There you go. That's literally all of it in a nutshell.
Growing up with a Corvette like that'll do it to you, because I think that's where my love of cars came from. My dad has a 1967 427 big block convertible in the garage, and he is the only owner.
Wow.
All original. Yep.
Wow. That's cool.
He bought it when he went to Vietnam because he was like, I might die, so why not? And he's kept it ever since.
Right. That's very cool.
That is awesome. Yeah. The only downside to my dad's fun cars is that he had long since gotten rid of them since when I entered the picture. He had, I think he had, what was it? It's what Travis Pastrana made into his Gymkhana car, the GL or whatever, the Subaru. And then
the GL,
he had a GL, I remember, and then a Volkswagen Fox, which is, I don't know how it was different from a Jetta, but and that's one of the cars I learned how to drive a stick on at like 13, because it's like, go out and start the car and move it for me. And that's how I learned how to drive a stick shift.
That'll do it.
No, I mean, but unless Greg, Hanson, you guys have anything else, it is getting a little late here on the East Coast. Actually, we're all on the East Coast. So,
yeah.
As if the giant Georgia
I didn't realize how late it
was wasn't enough.
Because I entered late.
But I guess before we kind of skedaddle here, Jack, one more time, let our viewers know where they can find you, and then feel free to tease any exciting content you have coming up.
Yeah, so YouTube channel is called JAX Automotive. My handle across pretty much all social media is JAX1079. So you can find me everywhere on that. Always doing stuff related to cars and sort of co-hosting it now with my wife. So I would sort of pitch it as married couple car reviews, from the everyday normal side to the enthusiast side, and then one side gives the other side a lot of grief in one particular direction, which seems to be going over well with the audience. They like to see me get made fun of for all my deficiencies. So that's kind of what we do. And then coming soon this summer in May, I'm going to be working on a new automotive venture. So if you join us on any of those channels, you'll start hearing about it in the near future. But it's going to be more of a deep dive automotive themed content, not really reviews. So stay tuned for that.
Nice.
Should be fun, and I'm looking forward to it for just sort of the creative freedom and exploration.
Very awesome.
Very cool.
But yeah, so that's gonna do it, guys. Thank you everyone who watched. We had a few people donate. Doug, and Anthony. Thank you guys so much for the stars. It's been great having you on, Jack. Thank you so much for doing this. Not only are you here providing an entertaining and an interesting viewpoint, and it's been a fun stream, power and internet outages notwithstanding. You also brought Hanson back to the stream, so it's a win.
Well, yeah,
win,
thanks
win.
for having me.
Anytime.
It was a great time.
You're welcome anytime you want. But as for this show, I'm Chad. We've had Greg, Hanson, and Jack with us tonight. Thanks again for watching, and we will catch you in the next one.
Y'all have a good one.
See ya.
See you guys.
All right, and we're out, and yet I'm somehow recording. What the hell is going on, Streamlabs?
I think
Yeah.
Jack left. Are you there,
Oh.
Jack? Oh no, he's gone. He left.
Oh, okay.
He's like, oh my gosh, I thought it was just going to be me and Hanson. The other two, fuck that.
Are we still in the stream or
No,
no?
we're done.
It's over? Okay. All right.
If you noticed, he's frozen. Actually, that's a very good
Yeah.
freeze for him. But yeah. All right. Yeah, I kind of feel like
It was a long one. Almost 3 hours. Actually, a little over 3 hours.
By the way, we are still
No.
on.